All right, what's up guys? Well, today I want to talk a little bit about garage flooring, specifically Swisstrax. All right, so a couple of months ago, we started the process of remodeling the garage. And one of the main aspects of that was to redo the flooring, because like the old flooring was, old chipped painted concrete with tire stains and everything else. So we definitely had to do something for the garage floor. And by the time I got to the remodel, I pretty much already decided on a Swisstrax install. For one, I've never liked epoxy flooring. Just don't like the shininess when they put the flakes in, how it sounds when you drive on it. And in terms of, the different brands of tiles, there's a bunch out there, but with Swisstrax, I'd already seen like dozens of install videos from like Obsessed Garage and a bunch of other YouTubers where they did their Swisstrax setup, and they just look so good. Specifically, I like that the tiles are a little bit bigger. Like a next popular option would be Race Deck. I like that the Swisstrax tiles are bigger, right? Now, Race Deck does have an extra, like an XLC style tile that's a little bit bigger, but they're also like twice as expensive, right? So I figured that Swisstrax was a good blend of size, price, and I mean, they've got I've never seen anybody have a bad word to say about their quality, so it was kind of a no-brainer to go with a Swisstrax setup. Now, within the realm of Swisstrax options, like you have a couple of different tile types that you can pick from. I went with the standard ribtrax Pro. I figure it was either gonna be that. I also considered the smooth. What I didn't like about the ribtrax smooth was that because it's a flat tile type, it's more easy that any kind of dirt or whatever can lay on top of it. It's just a little harder to keep clean. I mean, I got a ton of animals. I'm always dragging pet hair out here. If you're working on a car with like old rusty brakes or something, all that stuff can just fall more easily between the grooves of the tile. That was pretty much the deciding factor to go with ribtrax Pro. Now, if you're watching this, you've maybe are considering an install. Maybe you've gone online and tried the designer to like map out your layout and everything like that. Dude, I spent way too much time on that. So if you've used the online designer, Obsessed Garage's website has one, Swisstrax has one. I'm pretty sure it's the same software, but nonetheless, you can go in, put in the dimensions of your garage, map out where your garage doors are, if you've got any obstacles that you have to work around, and then you can start like drawing in the tiles that you want, how you want your design to look. Again, spent way too much time on that. I was like, do I want to do a checkerboard option? Do I want to put like a design in here? Whatever. Ultimately, I kind of went back to simple. I did a pearl gray with a black border, which is not the most exciting design, but I figure I figure anything else that was gonna, spruce up the look out here, I would do with like wall decor, or, tool carts and stuff. Also, I figured that way I would just have two colors that I needed to keep on hand, two tiles of two extra colors that I had to keep on hand so that if I damaged a tile or if I messed up a cut or something like that, I have to worry about like stocking a bunch of different tiles. So I don't know, maybe in the future, if do another garage, I might do something a little bit more elaborate, but for this time out, I like the way this came out. The pearl gray specifically, I like the fact that it's light enough to not make the room look too dark, but it's also not so light that dirt really easily shows up on it. So I thought that was like a good blend of grays, and I think the black border ended up looking awesome. Anyway, so wrapping up on the designer, cool thing about that is that if you go out and plan your whole setup, you can mix tile types, tile colors, and then when you get to the last step, it'll print out for you how many you need of each tile, so super convenient. Quick note about the edge pieces though. So one of the steps is planning out where your edge pieces are going to be, and Swisstrax recommends that you at least put them between the rails of your garage doors. Now, unless you're doing some kind of elaborate, design with edge pieces in multiple locations, you only need to make sure that you buy the female looped edge pieces for in between the doors. So what I did, I accidentally bought the male ones, right? So the recommended layout setup for Swisstrax, or any modular tile really, is that you start in the front left corner of the garage and work your way right to back with the male pegged side on the left and the front. And so with me accidentally buying the male pegged pieces, I had two options. One, exchange them, which quite frankly, I just didn't feel like doing. So I just rotated the tiles 90 degrees and put the looped pieces in the front so that I could just use those male pegged pieces. Slight inconvenience because it just meant that instead of easily snapping on the tiles, you had to lift up the tile to put the next one down and snap on top of it. Not the end of the world, but just something to consider. Again, unless you're doing some, elaborate design, just make sure you buy the female looped edge pieces. Okay, so let's talk prep real quick, right? So one of the things to keep in mind is that if you have kind of like my old garage floor, if it's, the tire tracks and everything like that, all of that stuff will show through the tiles. So my recommendation, what I did was, so I took an extra day, mopped the floor really well. I did like 4 rounds of simple green, tried to mop it as best I could, scrub all the stains and everything like that. Went to Home Depot, got a couple of gallons of concrete floor paint. Dove gray was the color, which was pretty close approximation to pearl gray, not that it matters, but nonetheless, got some concrete paint, did 2 coats of paint on the floor and on the step, and I'm telling you, it was absolutely worth doing. So, whatever issues you have on your garage floor, unless you're starting from like a brand new laid out pad or something, like those tire marks, that all will show through the floor as you're walking around. Granted, when you look at the Swisstrax at an angle, you see like the design of the rib directions and everything like that. It looks real cool. But as you're walking around, you can see straight through the floor. So anything that is on your garage floor will show through. And I just think that if you're gonna go through the trouble of doing the whole Swisstrax install, not a bad idea to take an extra day, paint the floor, get it reset. I think it's worth doing. Now let's talk about layout real quick, right? So if you have a solid color design, or if you're doing like a checkerboard, anything where symmetry is not a consideration, then you probably don't need to worry about this. But if you use a border, right? So like I have the one border around the room, or if you have a 2-car garage, like I said, if you're doing each car gets its own rectangle, you might want to take this into consideration. So again, if you start from left to right, when you factor in your border, depending on the width of your garage, there's a great chance that your border is not going to be symmetrical to the room. You might have it off a little bit on one side and the other, and I don't know about you, but this would have bothered me. So what I did was, my border starts on the 3rd row in and on the 3rd row from the sides. So I got the first 3 rows laid where it had the black tile incorporated, and then centered that to the room. So this is going to add to your project time if you do it, because now instead of making your cuts against the wall on the right side and the back of the garage, you're also going to have to do the left-hand side. But I think that's worth doing if something like symmetry is going to bother you. It would have only been off like maybe an inch or 2. It would have bugged me. Again, I think that is worth doing. It's going to add to the time, much like the prep work, but it's worth it. All right, now let's talk tools real quick. What kind of tools are you going to need to do a Swisstrax install? Well, for me, I went and got a table saw. I thought it would be easy just to be able to feed the tiles through the saw. It was for the most part, but honestly, man, if I had to do this again, I would just get a circular saw, get a couple of saw horses, get a piece of plywood to put on top. I think that's going to be the easier option. Now, if you have to make any kind of intricate cuts, jigsaw works great. We already had one of those, and so when I had to do around the pole, that was really, easy tool to use to do any kind of like circular cuts or whatever. Another thing is that if you are in the corner of your garage, and like a lot of garages with cinder block, it's not a perfect square. Sometimes it kind of rounds that corner a little bit. Just grab a box cutter. So a box cutter, if you have to do like a slightly rounded corner, you can just kind of cut through, that plastic a little bit. It does a pretty good job with that. Wouldn't recommend it for any kind of precision work or long cuts, but again, in a pinch, if you just got to make short adjustments, box cutter works great. Okay, so now time to cut the tiles. And this is the part I couldn't wait to talk about, because I'm telling you, man, this is so cool. If you're handy, and you might already know about this, I didn't. My father-in-law taught me this. He used to install tile back in the day. It's an old tile installer's trick, and it is like magic, right? So let's say that you got all your hole tiles in place. Now you're ready to start making your cuts. Well, what you don't want to do is you don't want to just measure one point from the middle of your tile to the wall, because if there's any fluctuation in the angle, it's not going to be reflected in your cut, and you might be a little bit off or under, whatever on one side. So to combat that, you'd be like, all right, well, let me take measurements on 2 sides and then connect that line. That would be the way to do it. However, that's going to take you forever. So here's what you do instead. So get 2 tiles. One's going to be your junk tile, and one's going to be your cut tile. Let's say this is the junk tile. So cut off all the loops first, because you need 2 sides that are perfectly flat, and you don't get that with a tile because the loops are going to be in the way on one side. So just cut them all off, because it'll just be easier for you. So get your cut tile. You go to your last hole tile that you're going to go up against your wall, put this straight down on top, like perfectly align this on top of your last place tile. Make sure the loops are oriented in the correct direction. Then you get your junk tile, put that on top, push it against the wall, and then the exposed area, you draw your line, make your cut, and that section will snap into place. I'm telling you, dude, it works perfect every single time. And if there is any fluctuation in angle between your tiles and your wall, that gets reflected in your cut, because when you push your junk tile against the wall, if it's off a little bit, you'll see that in the cut. And so I'm telling you, it works perfect every single time. I don't know who thought of that, but it's genius. I use that for every single cut that I made around the room, around the steps, even around the pole. You can factor that in. Works like a charm. Okay, now for a little review and some things that I've kind of noted over the past couple of months of having this in. Again, I wanted to have these installed for a little while to get a real, good impression of what it's like to have them. I didn't want to just install and immediately go to the camera because obviously my only impressions would be positive because they would just look great and everything like that. So after a couple of months, I feel like I have a pretty good working idea of having them installed. And the first thing, which will be to the surprise of no one, I love these things. This was such the right move. I absolutely love having these installed. Okay, first thing, I love the fact that the floor always looks clean, right? So again, with these, tracking all kinds of animal hair out there, working on the cars, all kinds of crap falling through, but the garage floor always looks clean. I know it's not. I know it's dirty right now. I haven't cleaned them since they were installed about 4 months ago, but it looks clean. And when it comes to keeping them clean, it's really not difficult. One, you can just vacuum over top of them and it'll pick up most of the stuff that falls in between. I have done that once or twice, but you can vacuum them to pick up the stuff in between. And then for keeping the top clean, you can just mop them, right? So you can just go get some Mr. Clean, maybe some APC, dilute it a little bit, get a mop, good to go. Now, in terms of any water that falls through, so these things, they have channels cut underneath, so any water will just run right through to the grate of the garage. But like if you're just doing mopping or something like that, anything that goes through will probably just evaporate. So easy to keep clean. They always look good. Always look clean. I think they look great too. So the other thing I love is obviously how good it looks. Now, day in and day out in here, you kind of get used to it. But sometimes if I have the garage door open and I'm outside the garage looking in, especially for some reason at night if the lights are on, I can't help but notice, it's like turning back to look at your car, right? I can't help but notice, man, the garage looks so good. I don't know what, it looks professional, I guess. It looks like, I don't know, it looks finished, it looks awesome. So anyway, highly recommend the tile flooring. Doesn't matter which ones you go with. Again, I love the Swisstrax. I think the size and everything was like the perfect proportion. But dude, modular tile flooring is good stuff. I love it. I will say it was a little weird for the first couple of days of walking on the floor. I'll give you that. I don't know what that means. I'll give you that. But it was kind of weird for the first couple of days. It took a little getting used to. Now I come out here and I don't even notice. I mean, you obviously notice that there's a difference between walking on a tiled floor versus, whatever's in your house, but it doesn't feel weird anymore. I don't know if that makes sense, but it took a couple of days just to get used to the feeling of walking on the floor, but whatever. That's just, I think, worth pointing out. Another thing worth pointing, we're gonna get into some cons now. Not necessarily cons, but things that I think you should probably be aware of if you're gonna do a Swisstrax setup. One, and this isn't really a con, it's just the nature of wear and tear. So you can roll anything over these tiles, right? Any size, anything that has any size wheel, reasonable enough to roll over, not a problem. But take a refrigerator, for example, that have the little wheels that you can push around. If you roll any kind of heavy object over the tiles, it's not gonna damage them, it's not gonna hurt them, but there is a chance that you might see, maybe at a microscopic level, there's a little bit of scoring. So you might see the trail that it leaves behind. I don't care about this, it's not damage, it doesn't really bother me, but if you're super finicky about stuff, just a heads up, that is something to take into consideration. I don't think it would deter anybody from installing these, but you will maybe see a little trail, but that might just go away after some cleaning, I don't know. But it's still something worth noting. Another thing is that if you do a Swisstrax installation, I highly recommend that you get some kind of a tile removal tool, right? So I got this one from Obsessed Garage specifically for popping Swisstrax, called the tile popper tool, I think. So it's skinny enough to where it can get in between the grooves of the tile, and then you rotate 90 degrees and pull up. So if you have to remove a tile, let's say you spilled some oil or something like that, your catch pan wasn't lined up, just note that it will take a little finagling, but you don't have to displace a whole bunch of tiles in order to get to your area. But again, it is a little bit of finagling to get the tiles up. Now here's the one area that, I don't know that this is a con, but it's something that you definitely need to be mindful of, and that is, unless you are lucky enough to have a lift or some quick jacks, if you're still using a jack and jack stands for your car in your garage on top of your tiles, be super mindful about this. You can still use a jack and jack stands in the garage, but two things. One, for your jack, make sure that when you go to jack your car, you know how when you lift the car, the jack has to be able to roll a little bit? So what I did, the very only issue I ever had, the only tile I had to replace, the very first time that I used a jack in the garage, you probably aren't gonna be able to see this right? But anyway, right in here, there's kind of a little bit of a divot you can see, but what you definitely can see is that crushed plastic underneath, right? So I had this tile in place, went to go put the jack in to go jack up my car, and what I didn't notice was that the wheel of the jack kind of got caught in a divot at just the wrong angle. So as I was jacking up the car, the jack wasn't moving. So all that pressure was being forced down and spreading out. And at one point I started seeing the tiles bow underneath the car. And so that was like, oh crap, something's wrong. So dropped the jack, dropped the car, and then all I did was just reposition the jack a little bit such that the wheels could move, jack the car back up again, and it was totally fine. So again, it's not that you can't use the jack in the garage, you just gotta be careful, just watch when you start to jack up the car. This tile I had to replace, that's why it's good to have extras. And I haven't had an issue since then. Which brings me to my next point about jack stands, right? So depending on the type of jack stand that you have, if you have the kind that have the, the hard corners, like I have these door latch jacks that I got ages ago. I don't think I've actually used them to hold up a car, but they came in handy with exhaust a couple of times. But be careful with those because those will probably dig into the plastic of the tiles. Instead, I recommend these other jacks. Forget the name, I'll show them up here, but these are the ones that I use day in and day out. So they have the, the round bases, and that is plenty of surface area to disperse, the weight, the pressure of the car. So we use these. We had the Kids Super up on all 4 jack stands for a solid 2 months, and I'm telling you, when we took the car down, there was no trace that the jacks were ever even the jack stands were ever under the car. So those things work fantastic. Highly recommend them. Linked in the description below. There's a couple of different brands that have a similar design, but really the point is you just don't want the jacks that have the hard corners. Get the ones with the round bases. All right, guys. Well, I think that is all I got for this one. Yeah, man. You know what? All in all, I am super happy that I went through with this. It wasn't really like a debate. It wasn't not going to, but I'm just saying, like, now that it's done, I love the results of this. So if you're thinking of doing it, I would highly encourage it. I'm hard pressed to believe that anybody would be disappointed with the results of a setup like this. If you're one of those people who's like kind of on the fence between doing an epoxy setup or tile flooring and maybe price is a consideration, I think that you're probably gonna come out better on something like a Swisstrax install. I think price per square foot, it's gonna be a little bit cheaper. But either way, man, just the quality of it is fantastic. So, I mean, it's only been 4 months, so, whatever. But the durability so far has been great. I mean, you see these things installed in professional shops where they're doing, stuff day in and day out. I don't quite have that set up here, but nonetheless, they're for 4 months, they were holding up pretty well, and I can't imagine that they're not going to in the long run. So anyway, yeah, super happy with them, highly recommended. So I hope you got something out of this video, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.